Welcome to the PrisonPOD, a podcast for all people experiencing incarceration. The mission of this podcast is to save lives, restore hope, reduce suffering, and recidivism. Many show ideas come directly from the listeners, so please write the host. PrisonPOD, Post Office Box 294, Orono, Maine, 04473. Here is your host, Ms. Valerie.
Welcome to the PrisonPOD. Today we have Mitch Pearlstein joining us, and we will be talking about second chance hiring. Mitch has a long history in educational research and will be sharing with us some myths and facts about second chance hiring. Welcome, Mitch.
Thank you so much, Valerie.
And where are you joining us from today?
I'm this morning in St. Paul, Minnesota. I live in Eden Prairie, which is about 15 miles to the west.
So, Mitch, I've been looking at your background a little bit, and you have quite an extensive background in education, and you're also an author. And what really grabbed me was the book that you've recently written called Second Chance Hiring. Could you talk a little bit about that book and what prompted you to write it? Did you have previous experience in that area?
Not much if you go back more than 5 years. On the personal side, my wife and I adopted a little girl a long time ago now, 30 years ago, who came from a horrible situation, and her life has been very difficult since then. And she's had some second chance hiring problems. She's spent time in prison and other places, but more immediately, I was asked to be a director, a member of the board of directors of a reentry program in Minnesota called the Redemption Project, started by some friends, one of whom had just spent some time in federal prison. And I came on board probably about 5 years ago, maybe 6. And somewhere along the way, I was asked to write a book about second chance hiring. I hadn't written one in a bit. I get edgy if I haven't written one in a bit. And I started writing a book about second chance hiring. I took a pause when we ran out of funding. And then I said, oh, what the heck, I'm going to write it and finish it anyway. So I did finish it. I sent it off to the publisher, Bloomsbury, about a year ago. And it came out about 6 weeks ago. Is it selling? I don't have the smallest clue about whether or not it's selling, but I'm very, very pleased with it. It's a contribution. I view it as a contribution on my part.
And where can people find that book?
Always Amazon. That's the easy answer. But the publisher is Bloomsbury, Bloomsbury. It's a British house. They purchased a chunk of Rowman and Littlefield, which had been my publisher for a long time. So if you go to Bloomsbury, you'll find it there.
Sure. Anyone who's familiar with this program knows that many people coming home from prison have a very difficult time obtaining employment. And I think a lot of that is because there's so many myths about people coming home.
Right.
So can we address some of the myths first?
Well, let me hit it from this direction. Let me be candid. Many of the people coming home have problems, surprising, mental health problems and the like, and they recidivate at high rates. Generally, I'm pleased to say, because of parole violations rather than committing new crimes. But the fact is, hitting it from your direction, many, many people coming out of prison are equipped, are interested, eager to work, and they need a chance. One of the things I've learned in doing the book, maybe the most important, I thought I would have to write a really strong bit of advocacy saying this is what we have to do. Employers have to do a better job of hiring people who come out of prison. And I discovered that the idea itself, that second chance hiring, is a good idea. My sense is that has intellectually won the day. No one is really arguing against the idea. The trick now, more than a trick, is to get these things implemented, these efforts implemented. And it gets complicated, one can imagine. And there are many, by the way, employers of large and not so large, famous and not so famous companies that are committed, they say, to hire people coming out of prison. But that doesn't mean it's easy to do. And one of the reasons it may not be easy to do is that the people under them who actually do the hiring may not be as committed to the idea as the CEOs may be. So the idea, again, is to work on implementation. There is clear evidence that people who are coming out of incarceration find employees once they get hired. Human resource people say quite frequently they are every bit as talented and loyal, and sometimes more loyal because their options are fewer, than people who have not been incarcerated. So we have to make that case that this is safe. If done properly, it is safe. Though, of course, there's one of the things I write about. People are afraid of crime. Not surprising. It's in the very culture, and understandably. So that is a large part of the context, and we have to overcome the idea that second chance hiring, again, if done properly, is perfectly safe, or as close to perfectly safe as it can be.
I think sometimes too people think that everyone who's in prison is a career criminal, and a
Right.
lot of times it's one incident that's brought them there,
Correct.
and they've done their time, and a lot of times they've learned some new skills while they're there because there are facilities that have job training and job
Right.
preparation. What do you find is the biggest reason people don't want to hire? Is it because they're of fear?
At some level. But again, I don't want to ignore the fact that a lot of people coming out of prison have literacy problems. They have mental health problems. This is very complicated stuff, as you well know, as you know better than just about anyone. So it's a combination of things. But if someone is really eager to work and they have their life pretty much in decent order when they get out of prison or shortly thereafter, they will be good employees. And one of the arguments of the book, the subtitle is, after saying second chance hiring, it is an economic and ethical necessity. We need people to work. It's as simple as that. We don't have enough people working in the society. Going forward, we will have even more pressures because we will have fewer people working. Americans are not producing as many babies as we need. Our replacement rate, to use the jargon, is very low. And going forward, the growth in our workforce will be overwhelmingly because of immigration, legal immigration. And in this environment, people coming out of prison, one would hope, would be viewed as more valuable than they have been viewed. So that is the large part of the argument. It's an ethical argument, meaning it is the right thing to do. The economic argument, we need people working.
Well, on the other side of the coin, too, is if somebody has gainful employment, they're less apt to recidivate.
No question. That is clear cut.
So, when did you start writing the book?
When did I start writing this one? Say about 5 years ago. It's been a lengthy process.
Did you find that anything changed during that time from when you started until?
I have found that there's a greater recognition that we need people employed in this country. Otherwise, the economy is simply not going to do as well. An interesting, unfortunate quirk is when I submitted the manuscript, which was, as I say, a bit more than a year ago now, the economy had more jobs available than people looking for jobs. That was a year ago. And in the year, that changed a bit. And now we have more people looking for jobs than there are jobs available, which sort of undercuts my argument. But there's no question in my mind that that will change. Jeff Korsenik, I don't know if you know the name. He wrote a book
No.
called Untapped Talent, which I view as the best book about reentry right now in terms of people getting jobs and putting together good lives. He has made the point very clearly that an economy that is not growing, that does not have enough people working, more people all the time, is an economy that is always not too far from recession, where hope and enthusiasm and optimism are compromised.
You know, right now there's such a need for trades, at least here there is in
Yeah.
Maine. If you want to get an electrician or plumber, you're talking months out before you can get them unless it's an absolute emergency. And when people are in prison, that's a great time to train them for those types of jobs and going to really address a need here in society because for so long we've been pushing the 4-year college education or 6-year or 8-year.
Yeah.
I was there for 10, so it took me a long time to finish and a lot of money. And there's a lot of trades that are getting overlooked because of that, I think. We push college, 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 but I also think there's such a demand for the trades out there, and so many could fill those.
Oh, you're making me happy here. I did a book called Education Roads Less Traveled, I think was the title. Subtitled something about solving America's fixation on four-year degrees. It came out in 2019, I believe, and it had to do with the argument that we have too many people going to four-year schools who don't want to do that. They're pressed to do so by parents and peers in the very air we breathe. So they go off to a four-year school. They don't like it. It's not working out. And after a year and a half, they may drop out. And now they are underemployed or unemployed, in debt, quite likely, and probably also not feeling great about themselves, when in fact there are great careers, great jobs, particularly for people who like to work with their hands in the trades. We are on absolutely the same page, and we need those people, especially the number of baby boomers I have read who are retiring every day is about 10,000. 10,000 baby boomers retiring every day. Baby boomers born between 46 and 64. I'm one of them.
Me too.
Many of them are in the trades. They've been excellent. They have talent, there's skills, which we're losing. We need people doing those kinds of jobs. And I do mention in the book, the new one, that this is the case. One of the issues, it seems to me, though, one of the complications is it takes some time to get trained in the trades. And whether or not people coming out of prison have that kind of time is a good question.
Also, if they could extend, I've seen some college programs that are going on in prisons that are extending it when they come out
Right.
and giving them that opportunity. I don't think there's a lot, but that's a great idea, to have that opportunity to extend any program they started within a facility. So then when they come home, they have to be able to finish their job training.
Yeah, my sense is yours. There are, because we have a lot of prisons, there are a goodly number of programs of various sorts, some better than others. And one of the ideas in the book is that we need more and better programs, both in prison and when people get out, in reentry programs. And I have the greatest respect and affection for reentry programs, the people who work at them. They're doing God's work.
Definitely. We're going to pause here to bring a couple of brief messages from our supporters, and we'll be right back.
Music by Stir Crazy Music. www.stircrazymusic.com.
Attention! Corrio, a better way to connect with loved ones who are incarcerated. Without Corrio, family and friends wait for a call and hope they can answer. With Corrio, inmates can call or message at any time. When your inmate calls their Corrio number, they will hear your voice and text messages. Inmates receive and leave messages at any time using standard prison phones, making connection easy and predictable. For information about Corrio, visit Corrio.org. Stay connected.
Welcome back. I want to remind our listeners that we are talking with Mitch Pearlstein, and we're talking about second chance hiring today. When you was doing your research on education, did you do any research on education in prisons?
I wouldn't say it was extensive. One of the points I make, it's a cliche to say that there are not good programs in prisons and that prisons elsewhere around the world are more progressive and all. And generally speaking, I would say that the case. But I really don't know how many really good programs or how many mediocre programs or how many bad programs are out there. I made the point, as you say, my background is in education, and I really don't know how many of the, in the vicinity of 100 1,000 school districts in the United States are really doing a good job. If I start making comments like, well, generally speaking, they're lousy, I'm sure to be beaten over the head by a bunch of superintendents who disagree and have a reason to disagree. So the same thing would be the case with wardens. It's mixed. I think that is fair to say. I wish I had a better sense, but it is certainly mixed.
Speaking of wardens, did you talk to any of wardens when you were writing your book?
I'm afraid not. An admission, I did not do as much interviewing as I would have liked. In the other books I have done on family fragmentation, particularly, I was working for an organization, a think tank, Center of the American Experiment, that had a budget. So I could fly every which way interviewing a bunch of people. In this instance, I was absolutely on my own. So the amount of travel I could do was limited. And I'm not proud of this. I should have spoken to more people, but I still stand by what I have written.
I'm really looking forward to reading the book. I usually try to read all my books before I interview somebody. This is just one that it's wintertime and I was, counting pennies on books.
And I'm afraid this is a little too pricey, pricier than I would like, but I'm not going to say how pricey.
Yeah. The thing is, though, is it's costly to do something like this. And if it's anything to do with the educational end of it, you're always going to have a higher, this is a book that, in my opinion, should be used in colleges.
I love what you're saying. I hope some professors pick it up. That would be. I have no idea, frankly, how well it's selling. I'll find out eventually.
Well, I've just put a post on my social media this morning about the book. There's not a lot of writings. I mean, there's some out there, but the ones that come from the heart, you have to have common sense, but you also have to use your heart too when you're doing this work. We're dealing with human beings.
I'm happy you have said that. Are you familiar with former Minnesota Governor Al Quie?
No.
Al Quie, the best human being I've ever known. I wrote his biography when he turned 85. He died 2 years ago, within 31 days of turning 100. He spent 40 plus years of his life visiting men in prisons. He was very close to Chuck Colson during the Watergate years. Didn't like him during Watergate, but when Chuck Colson went off to prison, Quie and a couple of other members of Congress had just been with him for a number of months, discipling him, is perhaps a term, and they became very close. And Chuck Colson in prison said, we need an organization that helps people coming out of incarceration, which was the start of Prison Fellowship, if people are familiar with that great program. And Quie was very close, as I say, to Colson. Colson went off on some kind of sabbatical, and Quie served as the interim president for a while. But the point is, Al Quie, his compassion was manifested in many ways, but especially in working with people who had been incarcerated, both when they were in and then when they were out. Add to that, my wife is the Reverend McGowan, Reverend Diane McGowan. We're an interesting family. I'm Jewish. She's an Episcopal deacon. And her compassion is very much hands-on. She used to run a homeless shelter in Minneapolis. And I want to do good things too. And the way I do it, I'm not going to be hands-on like Diane. I am not going to be hands-on like Al Quie was. But my contribution is the book and things that I write. And as I was early in the process of writing, we were in church one day, and the bulletin talked about suffering, the need to suffer, be with the person who is in prison. Think of yourself as being tortured, as the person being tortured. And this was right on the front of the bulletin, and I said to myself, I can take a hint here. Let me finish the book.
Yeah.
So
That's
this is
my next. That's my next step, is to start writing again. I wrote a very small book years ago, but it's called Notes from the Peaceful Sociologist, and that's all it is. It was notes that I took over years about the work I was doing and people that I've worked with and people that I've lost along the way. So
tell me about your work in sociology. I have a doctorate in educational administration policy with a focus on higher ed, but my main disciplinary focus was sociology. So I'm resonating.
Oh, really?
You're saying.
So when I first started going to school, I really wanted to do a criminology degree,
Hmm.
but they didn't have it at the university I was attending. So I did a sociology degree with crime, law, and justice.
What
So
school was this?
the University of Maine.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
A black bear.
So
You're a black bear.
a black bear, yes.
It's the towns that I have. I know nicknames and team colors.
So yeah, and I really loved sociology because for 15 years before I went to school, I was an inmate advocate, is what they called it at the time. So I was actually going in and meeting with people in the prisons in groups and addressing needs that they had. And we also had a book program. So when I started school, I wasn't getting any recognition for the work I was doing. I wasn't being taken seriously. And somebody came right out one day and said, "You don't have any education." Even though I had tons of experience, I
Yeah.
didn't have the education. So I decided to go back to school. And that's what I did. And I fell in love with sociology. And then I was doing some peace studies courses on a minor.
Hmm.
And when it came time to do my master's, I ended up doing my master's in peace and reconciliation studies. And the two studies go so well together because you're learning about people and then you're learning how to have empathy and compassion to work with those people.
Hmm.
And it just seemed perfect. And that was my intention, was to actually teach on sociology and peace studies. I wanted to teach in the prisons, and COVID happened.
Yeah.
And that was the end of that. So that's how the podcast came about. We didn't
Good.
know if COVID was going to last for a long period of time. And this was a way I would still be able to reach those on the side. So the
Let's.
podcast came about.
You want to talk about empathy for a moment? I want to take
Yes.
this conversation in perhaps an unexpected direction. My wife likes watching TV shows like Love After Lockup, Orange is the New Black, and all. I like watching them less. It's difficult for me to have warm fuzzies for many of the people in these shows. And my argument is that I'm not alone, that lots of people, most people perhaps, they just don't feel that close, that warmly to people who are in prison, who are just getting out of prison. They're frightened of them. And to take it one step further, I write about tattoos. I don't like tattoos. And if a person is covered with them, I'm not going to have empathy or adequate empathy or really like them until I get to know them personally. And I do think this is something we don't talk about. We don't talk about how we simply don't feel close enough to many of these people until we get close to them. And we don't want to, if a person is covered with acres of tattoos, my reaction is not good until perhaps I get to know them. And I think we have to add that to the equation of the difficulties when we're talking about second chance hiring. What do you think?
I think that's a really good point. One thing that California has been doing is they have a program out there to remove gang tattoos before they come home. And
Yep.
I think that's really important. Tattoos are such a common thing here in Maine. Everybody has them. I
Yeah.
don't, but my kids are covered with them. So
Are they?
they love them. My son and his wife, they're
Yeah.
both crazy over them.
All right. So I'll have empathy and affection for your family. My daughter has about 7. Last I checked, my daughter has 7.
I will send you a piece that I did on tattoos and the
Good.
stories that they tell.
Good.
It's
Thank you.
So with the empathy situation, I totally understand that whole thing because for 20 years, all my work that I did with prisons was here in the state of Maine. The biggest reason for that, Maine doesn't have a death penalty.
Yeah.
And I didn't ever want to deal, excuse me for having the attitude I had, but didn't want to deal with those people
Right.
until I met them.
Yep.
Now, when I started getting letters, when this started going out, I never thought this would be heard on death row. Never in a million years did I think that people on death row had tablets, but they did.
Mhm.
And I started getting letters from North Carolina, Central Prison. And it just, at first, I just didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't want to get to know somebody that I thought was going to die. And I also knew how serious the crimes were to bring somebody to death row.
Right.
But having my background in sociology, I also understand that the majority of people on death row have already dealt with extreme trauma before they ever got there.
Right.
Abuse, neglect, not all of them. I'm not, and I'm not saying that's an excuse, but we were talking about mental health earlier. And this is one of those things that the other thing about death row is death is permanent. And this past December, Governor Cooper overturned 15 sentences he commuted of death row inmates. Now, those people are no longer on death row. If they had been executed, you cannot go back and change that.
We're on the same page.
So there's a lot of those things. So now I have been working with death row inmates for 5 years.
Oh, have you?
Yes, and they're all in North Carolina. Right now, North Carolina has had a moratorium on executions, but there's been a new governor who comes in who wants to start them back up. This is devastating to me. I have come to meet several of these men that are there and been writing to them and talking to them on the phone. I have a better understanding. Do I think they should all be released? No, that's not my opinion at all. I'm not an abolitionist. I do understand that there is a need for us to have some place to keep society safe from a certain amount of people. I don't think that is everybody. I think there's people on death row that could be released. Their crimes happened when they were teenagers. They're now 50, 60 years old. They're not the person that brought them in there. So my opinions and thoughts of people in prison have changed drastically over the years that I've been doing this work.
We are very much on the same page. I talk about there's a movement which I really didn't know about, and I don't even know how to describe it right now. I don't think it's terribly strong yet, but it has to do with people who have spent a long time in prison, 25 years or more. If their lives are now in decent order in prison, but they are scheduled to spend a lot more time in prison, we should consider letting them out if they are not a threat. It's the humane thing to do. And the think tank I founded and ran for 25 years, Center for the American Experiment, is a conservative free market think tank. And when I wrote what I just mentioned, this idea, I said I might be drummed out of the core, but no, which raises a question, conservatives inadequately compassionate where these things are concerned, and I would argue generally yes or generally no, but I don't want to go off in that direction necessarily. But on the question of homicide, one of the things I learned from Al Quie, the former governor, who was in Congress for 21 years prior, is that the one crime that sends people to prison, homicide, when these people get out, it's pretty much guaranteed they're not going to do that again.
Exactly. Well, that's the thing is, so many times this is a one-time situation. Like I said, they're not career criminals.
I'm a passion.
There are some that, do go on sprees, but I think that's quite a rarity.
Yeah.
So, boy, we've been really covering a lot of things today.
This is good.
Is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like us to talk about before we wrap things up today?
Let's do mental health.
Okay.
I talk about hesitations that people have about crime. I have just talked about tattoos. I'm very candid in the book about those things. Some people might think, well, if I'm really passionate about what I'm talking about, giving guys a second chance, why do I bring these ideas up? Well, if I don't, first of all, I won't be able to sleep perhaps. But the way to make an argument is to be as forthcoming as possible with people. And the question about mental health is similar. My daughter, who has spent time incarcerated, who is now about 34, we adopted her when she was 5. We've known her since birth. She has her mental health problems. I know how difficult this can be in so many ways. One of the people I interviewed was involved on staff, a senior position in a federal prison, and I started talking to him about mental health as I talked to other people who had been in these lines of work, and they all talked about, of course there are these mental health problems. There was one person who said, by definition, if you spend time In prison, you're going to have some mental health issues. Question, how do we deal with them? How do we help these people? How do we make it? Here's a good one. One of the reasons there are hesitations on the part of some employers is they want to do the right thing, but they wonder if their organizations have the wherewithal to help people who need various services, not just mental health, but all the wraparound services you can think of. Well, one way of dealing with that is to work with outside agencies. But these are the real issues, and I would like to think I'm putting them on the table better than most, to be frank about it.
I was going to say that's a really good book for employers. Is uh, one thing that people don't understand is post-incarceration syndrome, which is similar to PTSD, but it has even more levels to it.
Right,
And, if there was a manual that all employers could read about that, there would be certain things that they would understand, like walking up and grabbing someone on the shoulder. You don't do that.
right. But I would write a book that, to sound bookish, was just going to be a book about history and arguments and so on and so forth, that I really didn't want to write one that talked about lists of things that employers needed to do, 1 through 10 or something like that, because you go online and they're all over the place.
Yeah,
They're terribly repetitive, also terribly redundant. I
yeah.
didn't want to do that. Unnecessary. But as I was finishing off the book, I said, by not having it is a terrible omission. So I have a chapter on what employers should do, and I just suggested a couple of things: follow best practices, but work with outside agencies as appropriate to make these programs work.
I always tell people I have 30 years experience working with people inside and outside of prison. And if anyone ever wants to contact me with any questions, they're more than welcome to do so, because I have a unique experience in the work that I've done. I've worked in every area you can imagine when it comes to incarceration.
I have a great respect for that. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. I want to remind our listeners we've been talking with Mitch Pearlstein. His book is Second Chance Hiring. You can find it on Amazon or through the publisher. I will make sure to have all that information available, and make sure to pick up the book and read it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. We'll be back again with another edition of the Prison Pod in about a week. Thank you for joining us.
You have been listening to the Prison Pod, a podcast not just for those in prison but for anyone who has been affected by incarceration. Ms. Valerie would love for you to write to her with your questions, comments, and show ideas. The address is PrisonPod, Post Office Box 294, Orono, Maine. 04473.